Get yourself to okjersey.com, where you can buy all the best football shirts around, including the amazing vintage Spurs tops I wear on this channel. But I think the Spurs shirt you'll really want is, of course, the absolutely magnificent Tottenham 1901 FA Cup winners 125-year anniversary top, available in both short and long sleeve. And as if that wasn't enough, if you go onto their website and like the look of one of their shirts, choose your size, get your name and a number on the back or the Champions League badge on the sleeve as well if you're that way inclined, then go to checkout, type the word BARN into the coupon section. That's BARN as in short for Barnaby, and when you do you'll get 8% off your purchase. Get yourself to okjersey.com, or if you're too lazy to go to the website, just scan the QR code that's on the left of me throughout this video. Enjoy! Hi guys, welcome back to the channel on what has, all in all, been a really good day for Tottenham Hotspur. That is apart from, of course, Wilson Odobes's ACL injury. He has torn his anterior cruciate ligament, and that is exactly the same injury that James Maddison did and that Radu Dragusin did before him. And we know it's going to be a year out for Wilson, and he was just starting to get his feet. So I feel really sorry for him. But apart from that, obviously Thomas Frank has gone. I think most of us, 99% of Spurs fans, and all the podcasters that I've been listening to today, all the journalists, the reputable Spurs beat journalists have all said, they all in agreement with me that that is the right thing, that Thomas Frank going, it was the right decision. But also tonight in the Premier League, and I'm recording this on Wednesday evening at 10 o'clock, it's been a really excellent night in terms of the other results around Spurs. And yes, I find it embarrassing that we have to talk about, relegation candidates and the results they've had tonight. But Forest drew 0-0 at home to Wolves. Nottingham Forest are on 27 points. Then comes Spurs, 29 points. Then Villa beat Brighton 1-0. Brighton still only on 31 points, only 2 points ahead of Spurs. They're having a bit of a difficult run. And then Crystal Palace at home lost to Burnley 3-2. Palace on 32 points, so within 3 points of Spurs still. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's important that we basically keep as many clubs around us as possible. Because if it's just as simple to you as thinking that it's West Ham who might be the only other one to go down, I don't think that's the case. I would also put Leeds still in there. I know Leeds under Daniel Farke, they've had a good little run. But if there was going to be a club that I think, other than those ones I've discussed, if it's not going to be Forest or Palace or Spurs or West Ham or maybe Brighton, then it wouldn't surprise me if Leeds could get dragged in as well. So that's why I think it's been a really good night for Spurs tonight. And yeah, like I said, we don't want to be talking like this. We don't want to be talking about this, but that's the reality of the situation we find us in. But let's talk about the potential replacements for Thomas Frank. Frank sacked earlier today. I did a show earlier talking about it. Thank you for all of those of you who tuned in. And if you're new to the channel, do give this video a like and do subscribe as well for daily Tottenham Hotspur news. So on the list, according to Alex Crook at the moment, Roberto De Zerbi and Maurizio Pochettino, two leading names under consideration. Tonight, a very reputable source from Italy claiming that Spurs have reached out to Roberto De Zerbi to ask for his conditions to potentially become the new Tottenham Hotspur manager. And you would think if De Zerbi was interested, that would be as a full-time manager only. Now, would you feel good if we got De Zerbi in now? That would obviously, I think, rule out the chances of ever getting Pochettino, certainly this summer, probably forever. And De Zerbi is such a he's such a aggressive man, isn't he? He wouldn't take boo for a goose when it comes to the hierarchy. He would tell it as it is. Very combustible character. Meanwhile, Robbie Keane and Francesco Farioli also discussed. Robbie Keane, obviously manager at Ferencváros in Hungary. I think a dream move for Tottenham would be to get Robbie Keane in on as an interim. But why would he leave a full-time job at Ferencváros in Hungary to come and be the caretaker manager when he's actually got them through to the knockout rounds of the Conference League, I believe, as well? Francesco Farioli, he is the Porto manager, doing a brilliant job at Porto. He also previously worked under De Zerbi, so similar kind of vibe of football. So you see what Tottenham are going for here. Back to the kind of flip-flapping into a manager who's going to try and play attacking football, which is the right thing. De Zerbi and Pochettino both understood to feel they have unfinished business in the Premier League, according to Alex Crook. According to Ben Jacobs, Maurizio Pochettino is open to a return as Tottenham manager. Any move, though, would only be possible after the 2026 World Cup when his USA contract runs out. According to Jacobs, Spurs are considering John Heitinger, who is, of course, Frank's assistant manager, only came in a couple of weeks ago, as a potential interim in the meantime. But just this really shows for me how many different reports are coming out of different sources, and really how little of a plan Tottenham have had for this sacking of Thomas Frank, because I've also seen reports saying that Tottenham are definitely looking externally from the club, outside the club, in terms of whether they get an interim manager or a full-time manager. So that would kind of rule Heitinga out. But Matt Barlow said Heitinga and Robbie Keane are two candidates to be interim manager at Spurs, although whether Keane would consider an interim role is unknown. Even if Heitinga, already at the club, is named interim, there will be a restocking of the coaching staff, according to Barlow, with some of Frank's staff set to depart. You would think that would be Justin Cochrane, who came with him, of course, from Brentford, and I think there are a few others. Also, I will tell you this, even though it's definitely slightly less reputable, but apparently Spurs have reached out to Diego Simeone's representatives, the Atletico Madrid manager, who's done such an incredible job there. Apparently his representatives saying that he is going to reconsider his future in the summer and see what options he has there. Other news coming out. Apparently, the Spurs hierarchy is now so conscious of the toxicity among the fan base that they realize they need a manager to bring unity to the club. That's led to Pochettino emerging as a preferred candidate. Some on the board are pushing to make it happen now, although the feeling is nevertheless that Pochettino would never leave that USA job before the World Cup. And then some of the other reports coming out today are of how much of the Spurs leadership, the higher-ups, the board, how many of them wanted Frank to be removed, and yet Vinay Venkatesham was keen, alongside Johan Lang, to keep him in post until 24 hours ago. Some of the Spurs leadership apparently felt they should sack Thomas Frank as long ago as 4 months ago, which is when I started talking about it, when it became clear to me that he had lost the dressing room. Certain figures in the hierarchy then pushed that again just before Christmas, until apparently it became a repeated subject of debate every Saturday over the course of January. Figures close to the board were even complaining about it being Groundhog Day, as it felt like they were having the same discussion every weekend. That does not surprise me, because I think if we as fans can see that the players are stopping being interested, if they ever were, in playing for a manager, and I don't think they really were, and I'll talk more about this later on in the episode when I go into Jay Harris from the Athletics article. He's really on the inside, has got a man in the inside, and talks very heavily about how the Spurs players really felt about playing under Thomas Frank. But if we can sense it from the outside that the players don't fancy a manager, then the hierarchy should have really seen it. I'm just going to go into some comments. Stuart Mead says, Redknapp in. Once again, I'm just going to say we cannot have the king of the jungle, a 79-year-old man. He's 79 next week, as our manager. The Ironing Shake says, we're so back. I wouldn't say we're back, but some good results for us tonight. Luke says, you lot really wanted Frank, right? I wouldn't say any of us really wanted Frank, but we felt strongly, and maybe you're an Ange Postecoglou fan, Luke, we felt strongly that Ange Postecoglou wasn't the right manager for us in terms of how he'd been found out with his tactics and his style in the Premier League. And Thomas Frank seemed like a more pragmatic option who maybe would be able to be kind of horses for courses, change his style depending on the teams we're playing. But clearly the players didn't fancy him from very early on. And in terms of Big Ange Postecoglou, fascinatingly, he was booked in. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this, but he was booked in to be on the Overlap podcast today with Gary Neville and Roy Keane and Ian Wright anyway, and Jill Scott. And then he actually came in and did the recording just minutes after Thomas Frank's sacking was announced. That is going to be released tomorrow, and that will be popcorn eating content, because Ange Postecoglou, don't forget what he said about when his replacement will be Dave Pragmatist or whatever. I doubt he'll be able to hold back. Luke also says, hope Odebear gets back, and the Ironing Shake says horrible on Wilson. MJ says, you've been right for months about the players not believing in Frank. I know we don't want player power, but when the manager is such a poor fit, isn't it understandable that they were disillusioned? Yes, exactly. And I'll talk more about this in terms of Jay Harris's article in a bit, guys. The Dutch guy asks, hi, Barnaby, do you think being relegated will actually be a wake-up call to the owners for their disastrous decision-making for the last 2 decades? Mate, thank you for your comment. You can't, as far as I'm concerned, say it's been disastrous decision-making for the last 2 decades, because 2.5 decades ago when ENIC took over, Spurs weren't really, they weren't a serious football club, mate. They weren't, and hadn't been for a long time, not since certainly not since 1991 and Terry Venables. And even then we were basically bankrupt. So Daniel Levy has to take his flowers for growing the club to the place it is now. So I can't call it disastrous decision-making for 2.5 decades. But what I would say is there was only one true period of time during that kind of 25 years where everything really came together. I mean, also it did a little bit under Harry Redknapp and Martin Jol. Martin Jol started it, but it was under Maurizio Pochettino, and Maurizio Pochettino really took Spurs about 10 years ahead of where their plans were. The plan was to build the stadium and then Spurs to become a Champions League team after that. That was part of the Northumberland development project. The Pochettino brought us forward 10 years. That surprised Levy. He loved it. He absolutely loved it. But then he got a bit ahead of himself and thought he needed a win-now manager. That was the biggest issue as far as I'm concerned. In terms of us getting relegated being a wake-up call, it's not what we want. Trust me, it is not what we want. Listen, if we got relegated, all the big earners would have to leave straight away, and to some degree, some of that would be a good thing, and we'd have to play the kids. But that doesn't mean the kids would be ready for a championship challenge. The championship is a horrible league. We don't want to go there. Trust me, it takes a long time and a lot of gritting of teeth often for teams to come back up. It's not always as simple as a big club goes down and then comes back up. We don't want to think about it. Gnarza says, I'm sort of excited about a relegation battle, lol. No, I'm not. Broncos 18 clearly doesn't want De Zerbi with the vomit emoji, and says De Zerbi has shit vibes. MJ feels differently, though. Says, I really like De Zerbi's style of football, but he might be too volatile. Volatile is a perfect word for it. He's so volatile. And how would that sit with the likes of Vinay Venkatesham, with the likes of Johan Lang, assuming he's still in the job, with the likes of Vivian Lewis, etc., etc. And Bronco says, I'd take Roy Keane over De Zerbi. Molthroth says, Pochettino narrative is so deluded. The guy is useless. I mean, he's not useless at all. He gets it. He's not useless. I don't know how that works in you. Latifu says, bring Ange back and let's see season 3. I don't think that's the right idea either. But like I said, it'll be fascinating to see what he says on the overlap tomorrow. PM says, no to De Zerbi. Wait for Pochettino in the summer. He has unfinished business at Spurs. I guess the difficulty, though, is it's not quite as simple as, it's not like we're in mid-table. If we were in mid-table, then they could have done this and then, let anyone take over, and yes, we can wait for Pochettino. But it's the spectre of potential relegation that makes this a very, very difficult decision. And Tim Sherwood has come out and says it's a difficult decision. Harry Redknapp has said how difficult a decision it is. Everybody in football knows that Tottenham cannot afford to make a mistake with this decision. So it'll be really interesting to see what they come up with. And for me, and I said this earlier, I'll say it again, if they give it to Heitinger, I think personally, and let me know what you think in the comments, but I think Heitinger would not get any grace from the fans. If we put in a dud, horrible performance with no football whatsoever against Arsenal and get tanked, Heitinger would get booed straight away, I think. Whereas if they brought in another manager from outside who had some kind of link to the football club who Spurs fans could get behind, I think he would get some grace. I really, really do. Leighton says, if it's De Zerbi, I would have to consider retiring supporting this club. So you feel very strongly about that. James Gaffney says, Poch ball is the way forward 100%. Kev Williams, thanks for your comment. Says, hi, Barnaby. Who do we have coming back from injury ASAP? I think the closest are the likes of Richarlison and Porro, kind of towards the end of the month, maybe. Those kind of people. But I did say earlier, it would not surprise me if under a new manager, some of these injuries, obviously not the really long-term ones, not the ACLs, but some of these injuries, players on the treatment table may jump up a little quicker than they would have done otherwise, I have to say. Rams asked, why the De Zerbi hate? I think people just think he's too volatile, to use someone else's words. Moltro says, Poch managed to end second with PSG and 6th with Chelsea, so realistically maybe he'd finish 8th to 10th with Spurs. He would need time. He needed time the first time. It didn't all happen in his first season, but I have to say, and I agree with Gnarza here. Listen to the High Performance podcast with Poch. It's beautiful how he speaks about us. I think he gets it. I do think he gets it, and he understands football. I really do think that. Okay, let's talk a little bit then about this Jay Harris from The Athletic article. Make sure you follow and subscribe to Jay Harris's stuff. He's brilliant, and he also used to be the beat journalist for The Athletic for Brentford as well. So he knows Thomas Frank really well. He's reported on him in a really fascinating way, not just today, but throughout his tenure at Tottenham Hotspur, in an unbiased fashion, despite the fact that he knows him kind of almost personally because he was at Brentford so long working on him. Firstly, he said this: opponents would come away from playing Spurs under Thomas Frank marveling at how predictable they were and how poor they were in possession and how easy they were to stop. Now, talk about hitting the nail on the head in terms of what I've been saying for months. For those of you who follow me doing my watch-alongs on BigUp, and if you don't, do come and join BigUp. Details of how are in the description box below of how to join me when I do watch-alongs. But I've been marveling at how easy it is to play against Spurs. I think we all have. So to hear that opponents have literally been saying after games against Spurs, why are they so bad? Why are they so easy to play against? That is a terrible indictment of a manager and the style he has. And I don't care how many injuries you have. You don't have to play in such a basic style, the U-shaped stuff, the endless channel balls, the one-dimensional long ball play. So that really fascinated me. Also, sources close to Spurs players repeatedly refer to the lack of direction on the training ground. Now, this is obviously a commonality when managers get sacked, but this doesn't surprise me at all, especially with Frank, because it was just so one-dimensional in matches as well. It goes on to say, or to the fact that after a defeat, the players would get too down on themselves with no one there able to lift and refocus them on the task ahead. It left a miserable mood during Frank's last 2 months, which no one could ever shift. This was part of why Tottenham wanted to target more leadership in the January transfer window, meaning the likes of Conor Gallagher, who of course we got in, but also Andy Robertson. And I would say, in reference to that transfer window now, clearly to me, one of the reasons Tottenham were not willing to spend money on any players, apart from Conor Gallagher, was that they did not trust in Thomas Frank. They knew enough that there was enough of a downtrodden vibe at the training ground and in matches that they wouldn't spend money. Now, whether that's the right decision or not will be shown in the summer, whether we get relegated or not. Because if we get relegated and they didn't panic and get some players in that would have helped us, that'll be a huge mistake. But in terms of trusting new players that Thomas Frank wanted, that probably isn't a mistake unless we get relegated. Jay Harris also said, privately, Thomas Frank held reservations about Christian Romero's leadership qualities, but clearly never felt strong enough to do anything about it, which is also a problem. If you give someone too much rope, then they will take it. And Christian Romero has clearly done that. But also, I should say, that is not solely a Thomas Frank thing. I remember reports a year ago about how players in the changing room thought that Christian Romero was allowed to be treated differently to other players, taking too much time coming back from Argentinian games, etc., etc. I'll tell you this: if Pochettino came in, he would clamp down on that shit straight away. I remember from his first time, he brought in a proper culture within that club, and I remember one of the little things that seemed stupid if you think about it too much, but it's about laying down culture. He made every player shake everyone's hand every morning. It didn't matter if you were the other players, if you were the person giving you breakfast, the chefs, the people around the club. It was all about that culture of politeness, of positivity and energy, positive energy. And Pochettino would bring that back. I think De Zerbi would cut down on that kind of shit in a different way with Romero. I don't think he'd have any of that, but I don't know. De Zerbi, I think, can only get the job now if Spurs are determined to not go down the Pochettino route. Another thing Jay Harris said, after Spurs lost painfully to Arsenal, Thomas Frank apparently lectured his players in the dressing room about standards dropping. The next day, multiple players, including the captain, Christian Romero, still turned up late. So listen, that's the Arsenal game. But let's go all the way back to that game where Mickey van der Ven and Jed Spence walked past Thomas Frank as he was asking them to go and applaud the fans. All the way back then, if you see something like that and the manager doesn't clamp down on it, the manager's dead, basically. It shows the player's not playing for the manager. Don't rate the manager. And it was all the way back then. And I have to say, obviously, and I'll caveat once again, as I always do with Daniel Levy, I was never Levy in or Levy out. I was always a little bit be careful what you wish for. But Levy would have seen that shit and he would have sacked the fuck out of Thomas Frank months and months and months ago, knowing that the squad weren't playing for him, and he would have got someone else in probably 4 or 5 months ago. So it's not always better. You know, it's not always better. Be careful what you wish for. Now, listen, this democratic boardroom, it may end up proving to be better in the long run, and let's hope it does. But at the moment, the fact that they've taken 4 months to sack him because they could not all agree on it, and Vinay Venkateshan was determined to give him time because he gave Mikel Arteta time when he was at Arsenal, that has not proven to our benefit. And I have to say, Vinay Venkateshan seems like a decent bloke as a person, but I don't think we should have the Arsenal CEO as our CEO. I really don't. I'm just looking at my Twitter to see if there's any more news. Just that Marco Senesi is a transfer target for Tottenham this summer. He is the Bournemouth centre-half whose contract is up this summer. Another bit of news. Another Tottenham player believed that while Ange Postecoglou was perhaps not the best coach, the players respected him, admired his charisma, and listened to what he said. But those players apparently soon stopped listening to Thomas Frank because, as this player saw it, he did not have the personality required to coach a big team. I have a Manchester United friend, and I talk to him all the time about how Manchester United will never succeed again until they bring in the manager with the right big personality who can deal with the egos and manage in like the perfect way. Pochettino had it for Spurs. Jurgen Klopp had it when he went into Liverpool. And bear in mind, Liverpool had won no title for like 30 years before Klopp went in. Ferguson had it when he went into Man United. They are rare. They are very, 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 very rare. And players will not play for a man who they don't feel has the right personality, who doesn't know how to deal with the egos as well as the players younger down the line. And clearly Thomas Frank never had that from pretty much day one by the sound of it. And now we're finding out because he's been sacked. But the hierarchy, and this is, and again, where probably Daniel Levy was way better than Vinay is. Daniel Levy would, I have no doubt, go and speak to his captain, go and speak to his senior players and be like, do you lot rate this manager? And if they didn't, like with Nuno, he'd give them the chop. But didn't happen enough, and now we're finding this all out, and it's too little, too late. Apparently, Thomas Frank told those close to him that the second half of this season would be painful, and that although Spurs have great facilities, they also had a squad low on quality. Now, that goes with what a lot of Spurs fans think. I personally don't think the squad is low on quality. I don't know whether he's talking about the players who are available after the injury crisis, but I don't think we're as low as quality as a lot of people do. And I think if we get the right manager or manager in who can give them confidence, I personally believe that we will improve pretty quickly. And at least we'll start to see some football on the pitch, which would galvanize the fans, which would allow them to be an 11th man at home and allow the team to probably pick up a lot more points. And again, Jay Harris said this is the last thing from his article. Many of the Spurs players did not enjoy the limited nature of Thomas Frank's football. Like we can all see that. Been able to see that for 5 months. A source close to one senior first-team player said just before Frank's dismissal that he was ultimately a coach for a smaller team focused on compact defensive shape, long balls, and counter-attacks. The player in question feeling that he was only able to perform, and this is some indictment on Thomas Frank. This player saying he was only able to perform at 10% of his potential because of Frank's restrictive tactics. I'm glad he's gone. He should have gone 4 months ago. We have to make the right decision now. That Jay Harris article, I can recommend you go and read it on The Athletic. Do follow Jay Harris online and subscribe to all of his stuff. He's really brilliant. And that is such an insight. Such an insight. Kev Williams says, I want Langer and Vinay gone. I think they are substandard. I don't like the Arsenal link with Vinay. Always said when Levy was in charge, be careful what you wish for. I want ENIC to sell up now. Well, listen, ENIC are less likely to sell up when Spurs are doing terribly, are they? Because they're not going to get a big number. But yeah, I kind of agree with all the rest. N17 says weak, unmotivated, pampered players. Well, listen, maybe there's an argument to say that the majority of Premier League players now are earning so much money that they are pampered. But trust me, they all want to win football matches as well. And what it takes is to have a manager they all believe in, that they all respect, that they will run through a wall for. Sorry to use the cliche. And it was just obvious from months ago that Thomas Frank was not that player. I just think, Blip here says they sent in a plumber to install a new fuse box. Yeah, nice analogy. Really nice. Because he just wasn't the right man. And you can't, and Daniel Levy was part of the recruitment process, and it was his choice, Thomas Frank. I mean, I was there as well, but it was Levy's choice in the end. And how he didn't remember what happened when he got Nuno in terms of getting in a manager who had done a good job at a lower team like that, without playing good football. And that's the key. So obviously at Southampton, Pochettino did a good job, but he had them as a pressing team on the front foot, possession based. But in getting Nuno and then in getting Thomas Frank, it's amazing to me that Levy didn't realize that. Simon Stevens says, democracy is great, but when you're led by stupid people, you can end up with chaos out of order. We used to hear complaints about Levy being a tyrannical control freak, but maybe he was right to be. Well, I think probably the truth is somewhere in between, but who knows? William says, my countryman Keane is a Spurs legend and fan. I think he would be a great appointment. Do you think, William, he'll have any interest in coming in as an interim? Kind of probably in the knowledge that he won't get it full time, but maybe thinking that would put him in the shop window, similar to what Carrick's doing, to allow him to get a job down the line in the Premier League. Or look, if he won the Champions League with Spurs, as unlikely as it is, they'd have to give him the job, wouldn't they? They'd have to. But who Who knows? Spurs check says, of course, we have only one dimension. We had no players of creativity available. Shame Ryan Mason is still not there. He is a Poch favourite. Ryan Mason, mate, no, it can't be, because he's unfortunately didn't do that well with his chance at West Brom, unfortunately. LM Donati says, no matter who the manager is, if the owner doesn't back the manager for signings, it will be the same thing over and over again. I mean, I would say this, guys. Over the last 5-6 years, Spurs have spent a lot of money, but it's about time now that we make the right signings. It really is. And someone says, our medical team will definitely be a part of the culprits for our injury crisis. Yeah. Something has to change on that. Salarkin says, it's really hard to see a good appointment for interim right now. I believe the players are more capable than what we've seen so far. I agree. Anyway, guys, listen. I just wanted to bring you this late tonight and talk about it. And obviously, as soon as we hear any more news on who will potentially be coming in as interim, which I think, tomorrow's Thursday and the players are back training on Monday, so it'll be pretty soon. As soon as we hear that, I will jump on another live show. Really enjoying talking to you guys through this. I feel something again. That's the key. I actually feel something again. We've made the decision. It happened too late, sure, but we've made the decision, and now we have to make a good decision. And it's not going to be easy, but we have to make a good decision. So anyway, if you like this video, please do give it a like on YouTube. If you're not a subscriber, please do press that subscribe button. I'm only 500 away from 20,000 subscribers. Would love to get there. Please do help me, and try and enjoy the rest of your night. Sleep well, and come on, you Spurs. Get yourself to okjersey.com, where you can buy all the best football shirts around, including the amazing vintage Spurs tops I wear on this channel. But I think the Spurs shirt you'll really want is, of course, the absolutely magnificent Tottenham 1901 FA Cup winners 125-year anniversary top, available in both short and long sleeve. And as if that wasn't enough, if you go onto their website and like the look of one of their shirts, choose your size, get your name and a number on the back, or the Champions League badge on the sleeve as well if you're that way inclined, then go to checkout, type the word BARN into the coupon section. That's BARN, as in short for Barnaby. And when you do, you'll get 8% off your purchase. Get yourself to okjersey.com, or if you're too lazy to go to the website, just scan the QR code that's on the left